Out of Order Gun Rights Podcast, episode 35.
Welcome to the Out of Order Podcast, your window into the firearms community, exploring those shaping the future of our rights and protecting our lifestyle, laws, legal cases, activism, and self-defense in a candid and honest podcast for our brothers and sisters in arms. Here's your host, James Kalita.
Thank you for tuning in to the Out of Order Gun Rights Podcast. Today's sponsor is Liberty Classroom, where you can learn to advocate for the free market and win any political or economic debate and get the equivalent of a PhD in free market economics online for just 24 cents a day. We also have an affiliate relationship with Amazon, so if you go to our show notes page, outoforderjameskalita.com/Adam, you'll find links to Amazon and purchase any of those products or anything you search for. Any purchases you make that day help out the show at no additional cost to you. Today's guest is Adam Kraut. Adam is an attorney at Prince Law and in Pennsylvania. He has his own YouTube channel and is a frequent contributor to the Gun Collective. And now, here's Adam.
Adam Kraut, welcome to the show.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Oh, my pleasure. So, Adam, you are a 2A lawyer in Pennsylvania and the host of the Legal Brief. Would you tell us a little about that?
Yeah, sure. So, as you alluded to, I am a practicing attorney here in Pennsylvania. We handle things throughout the state here and also at the federal level. So that takes up a good chunk of things. State stuff is everything dealing with things from license to carry, denials, issues like that, suing municipalities over violations of state law, gun trust, and then the federal stuff, everything from industry representation to individual challenges for Second Amendment as applied challenges for people who no longer are able to exercise their Second Amendment rights but are looking to restore that ability.
Wow. And you also have a video channel that you run,
Yeah.
Right?
I don't run it. So the Gun Collective is John Patton's channel. John and I have been friends for years, predating even our mutual interest in guns. It actually came from the car scene. And we were chatting one day. I was expressing, I guess, dismay and displeasure as to how there's just a lot of bad information that continues to circulate about firearms-related issues, particularly the legal aspect of it. And as a result of that, what was originally a Facebook rant, we were off and running a week later with the first episode of the Legal Brief, and that's been going on ever since. So I don't own it, but I produce content for the channel.
Oh, okay. Great. And so what inspired you to get into firearms?
Well, to get into firearms, so the first time, I grew up in a house that didn't have guns. The first time I actually ever shot a gun was in Boy Scouts down at Camp Horseshoe in Rising Sun, Maryland. And there was a stupid grin that never really left my face. So I turned 18, bought a shotgun, Remington 870 Express Magnum that I still have. I was told to actually get rid of it by my parents when they found out I had it. They weren't very happy. Obviously, I didn't, and it just kind of spiraled out of control in some ways from there.
Wow, great! And so, when you decided you were going to go to law school, did you have in mind that it was going to have that 2A focus from the beginning, or did that sort of come later?
That came later. So, law school was it was originally a way for me to put off life for another 4 years. As a night student, I was working during the days. I wasn't really sure what I wanted to do. My dad and my uncle were both lawyers. They actually both graduated from the same place I did. And I didn't go to law school with a focus as to this is what I want to do. Quite frankly, and honestly, I wasn't even really sure I wanted to be a lawyer, which, in retrospect seems like a stupid kind of decision to take on the burden of going to law school and all the other stuff that's associated with it. But I was entering my third year as a night student, so it was a 4-year program as a night student, and I was looking and thinking, man, I should probably start looking around for an internship, so when I graduate, I either potentially have a place for employment, or I can at least point to, like, I interned here at X place. So at the time, I was very active on a Pennsylvania gun forum, and I saw my boss's name, Josh Prince, mentioned a number of times throughout the years, even prior to this thought. So I sent them an email and asked if, they had any internship opportunities available, and we ended up coming up with something where I started interning there and graduated law school and was able to walk into a job waiting, which was a nice twist of fate in some ways. My thought behind it was really just that, I have an interest in guns. It's something I care about. I'd been politically active as far as engaged in the political process and encouraging others to do the same. So in some ways, it was a natural progression of that involvement I had. And in other ways, it wasn't, but it was probably one of the few things I felt that I might actually kind of like doing, as opposed to the other areas of law that exist that really didn't have any interest for me. So.
And so I think I get the sense talking to people that they feel that the Second Amendment kind of protects them and they don't need to worry too much about gun laws. But as a lawyer, you must see all kinds of pitfalls that people fall into. Any you can think of worth mentioning?
Oh, I mean, the Supreme Court has said that the right is not absolute. So everybody who just points to the language shall not be infringed as the catch-all there. The courts disagreed, and the system of we live in is a system of government, and particularly the court aspect of it with common law. The Supreme Court's interpretation of the Constitution is what kind of drives the narrative. So if the court has said that it's not absolute, then it's not that impenetrable shield of armor, I suppose. And if you look at constitutional provisions, interestingly, and not every state has it, but a lot of states have similar provisions in their constitution. So Pennsylvania, for instance, Article 1, Section 21, has the right of the citizens to keep and bear arms in defense of themselves and the state shall not be questioned in it. And, Delaware's constitution has a very similar provision to that, which juxtaposed to the federal constitution, without needing the court involvement, there's a very clearly delineated individual right to keep and bear arms. Where now you obviously, with the Heller decision and then the McDonald decision, which incorporates that to the states, the Supreme Court has said that there is an individual right to keep and bear arms. It's not just in the context of the militia, which is what anti-gunners are perpetually arguing. But state constitutions sometimes provide a greater amount of protection than the federal constitution. So really the world we're living in with the way things have been interpreted is that there are going to be gun laws. It's just a question as to whether or not the court has interpreted that kind of thing is permissible. We're going to see it more in the context of so-called assault weapons and large capacity magazines. That's where the battleground going to kind of be, I have a feeling, in the future, or not so distant future anyway. Particularly if you look down at what happened with Colby v. Hogan in the Fourth Circuit down in Maryland, where they challenged Maryland's assault weapons ban, and the district court said that the assault weapons ban was okay, it was constitutional. It got appealed to the Fourth Circuit. When things are appealed to circuit courts, typically it's heard by a panel of judges. There's a larger number of judges, and they select a subset to hear most cases. That panel came back and said that this is impermissible, it's unconstitutional, and the decision from the panel was actually a really, really good decision. It was well written, it addressed issues that normally aren't necessarily looked at, and it actually said that there was a stricter scrutiny that needed to be applied when looking at this. The state asked for it to be reheard en banc, which means the whole court, so all the judges as a whole, and as a whole, the court overturned that panel decision, which was really unfortunate. So now the Fourth Circuit has some bad case law in relation to this, but I think this is where you're going to kind of see the stuff play out as to whether or not courts start interpreting arms to include things like magazines, and whether or not the term arms would include firearms like the AR-15, for instance. And based on the decision in Heller, the common use test and things like that, I don't see how a court could come to any other logical conclusion sort of creating their own tests to utilize like the Fourth Circuit did. So I think that's really where we're going to see things kind of start to shape up as far as a battle, if you will. And until the Supreme Court elects to weigh in on it, it's going to happen in the circuit courts.
Yeah, and so I guess for gun owners individually, while they're waiting for all these things to pan out, how would you recommend they stay safe from falling afoul of the law?
Well, the first thing would be, make sure you know the laws of the jurisdiction you're in and follow them. I always tell people, my clients, that, I can't force you to do anything. I can only tell you what will or may happen if you choose not to follow the law. You see a lot of people on the internet, pounding their chests with the bravado of, I won't comply and things like that. And that's all well and good. You're perfectly capable of not complying with the law. Just be aware of the penalties and consequences if you choose not to do that. Really, it's going to boil down to where you are and knowing that you're in compliance with what the law is in that particular state. States like California, New York, New Jersey, Connecticut, Massachusetts, they're states that I wouldn't dream of bringing a gun into as a non-resident. Even just passing through, I'd do my best to avoid it if at all possible. Other states, like Pennsylvania's got some really good gun laws. The states out in the West, there's a lot of places where there aren't these heavy-handed restrictions, and it's really just knowing or doing the research if you're going to end up there.
So going back to Pennsylvania's Constitution, and it's written in there that I'm going to mess up the exact quote, but that the right shall not be questioned. And yet, for a really long time, it was, and that didn't even come up in court. Do you have any insight as to why what seems like such a powerful choice of words isn't as effective as we would imagine it to be?
That's an interesting question. I can't honestly say that I do have any insight as to why that is. I think some of it depends on the arguments that are advanced by the attorneys litigating things, whether or not they choose to focus in on certain things, whether or not they choose to, for instance, look at the conversations that surround the debate leading up to the adoption of certain things. I don't know whether or not I honestly haven't looked, so I don't know if, at least with Pennsylvania, how that's concerned, whether or not there's any documents about the debates as far as the wording of the different articles in our state constitution. You find that with legislation anyway, especially as time goes on and we enter more modern times, it's a lot easier to find things like that. So when you go and there's something in a piece of legislation that isn't necessarily clear, you may find some debates on the floor as to, well, what do you mean by this? So you can point to, all right, well, here's some legislative intent to try and give the courts guidance as to what the legislature actually meant when they were doing it. But as far as the constitutional provision, what seems to be fairly clear language, and courts not necessarily going for it in that steadfast, this is what it says, this is what must be what it mean, I don't know.
Okay. And I saw your video that you did on HR 5717, and it kind of seems like the federal government is providing an incentive for state governments to pass these gun control laws that take guns away from people that haven't been convicted of a crime and may necessarily not have done anything wrong. Did I understand that correctly? That's what HR 5717 is?
Oh, you're giving me a bill number and expect me to know it. I'm looking for it real quick here. Yeah, it's the Extreme Risk Protection Order funding type deal. That one. Yeah. Okay. It seems that the bill, at least from my reading of it, was proposing that funding be given to states to implement this kind of stuff. But it also seemed like in the same aspect, and this isn't me agreeing with the legislation, But it also seemed in the same aspect that in order to get that funding, the legislation had to have certain provisions in it that, I guess by this person's standard anyway, would seemingly comply with ideas of due process. Like I said, I don't agree that people get due process in this kind of stuff, especially when you're depriving somebody ahead of time of the ability to exercise a fundamentally enumerated constitutional right, and then you eventually give them a post-deprivation hearing. Unfortunately, courts have said that that's okay. I think that flies in the face of due process. But so yeah, that bill, my understanding of it from what I recall, is that essentially here's certain provisions that your legislation has to have in order to qualify for funding from the feds, in order to I guess advance those programs within the state.
Great. And let's see, I always ask my guests if there are any books they recommend gun owners should read, whether they be gun-related or liberty-related or just...
Yeah. There are, and I don't have a copy of the book in here. There is the Founder's Second Amendment is a good book, and I'm trying to think of what the other one was. It's going to escape me, I know it. But the Founder's Second Amendment is written by Stephen Hallbrook, and Stephen he's also an attorney. He's down in the D.C., Virginia area, and he has written extensively on Second Amendment issues for years now, and that's a book that listeners should certainly consider taking a peek at.
Oh, okay. Great. And let's see, where should people try and find you online?
Oh, well, if you want to follow me directly, you can do that on Facebook. You can search for, you can go to facebook.com/the Adam Kraut. You can follow me on Instagram @the Adam Kraut. You can check out stuff on the Gun Collective @the Gun Collective on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and you can also, I've got a website, adamkraut.com.
Oh, okay. And any parting words of advice for our listeners?
Yeah, if you're passionate about the gun rights issue, the best place to show your passion is by being involved in at the very least, the legislative process, by contacting your representatives and your senators, both at the state and federal level. The one thing that irks me probably the most, and does absolutely nothing for anybody, is the people who just write things in comments on Facebook, YouTube, news articles, whatever. If you're not being involved in the process, you're part of the problem, really. So make the time to do it. It takes all of 5 minutes. It's not really a lengthy endeavor, and if you need help, there's plenty of resources out there to help you frame your argument or your question or things like that.
Right. Oh, Adam, I thank you very much for being on the show.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for tuning in to the Out of Order Gun Rights Podcast. If you head over to the show notes page, outoforderjameskalita.com/35, you'll find links to our sponsors, to Prince Law, to Adam's videos, and if you know of any not-for-profit gun safety, gun education, hunting education, pro-gun groups that would like to promote their organization or an event, head over to outoforderjameskalita.com, fill out the form, and we will take care of that promotion for them. And thanks for listening. We'll see you next time.